Hello, 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 hello. It's Tea with the Druid, 214. Hello from a hot and something. It's gone so quickly. Lots of people piling in. Hot and humid Freehold, New Jersey. It feels like Freehold, New Jersey here in Lewes, Sussex, I can tell you. Hoping all my UK friends are doing okay in the heat. We're just about surviving, Sharon. Blessings from Lubeck, Sherwood Forest in Arden, a few degrees cooler in the forest. Yes, that's when you really appreciate the forest, don't you? On a really hot day like today, and you go into the woods and there's just this fresh and cool feeling. John is in the cool west coast of Scotland. Yes, now is the time to be on the islands and in the Highlands. Cooling County Tipperary, North Scotland. Alice, hello. Hello from Orléans in France. Hello, Marianne. South Africa. Gosh, well, it's feeling like South Africa, Lauren, I can tell you. It's been about 37 today in some parts of England. Here it's been about, I think we got up to about 31 centigrade. Lots of people coming. That's lovely to see you all. I'm not going to ask you how you're feeling. I've been doing that for the past few teas, but I think probably everybody just say hot or something like that. So instead, I'm going to set a quiz for you. There's nothing like a quiz on a very hot day. And here goes the quiz. I think it's quite long, the question, so I'll post it up as well. And the quiz goes like this. What topic can offer a practical solution to coping with the heat, at least to a limited extent, which has the potential to sometimes be humorous, sometimes absurd, but also sometimes unsettling, that has been used for religious purposes and political ends, as well as by every artistic medium imaginable, and which surveys suggest can be helpful in reducing symptoms of anxiety and promoting feelings of nature connection. So I'm going to post that question, and I would love you to post what you think is the answer in the chat. Let's have a look. Have a think. Is that a question? Yes, it's a question, Jamie. It starts off, what topic? Breath work, distraction, meditation, going skyclad in lakes, rivers, and oceans, forest bathing, storytelling. Sounds like going skyclad to me, says Kathy Johnson. Nudity, says Ruth Ann. Somebody else said naturism early on, Andrea. What have we got here? Sticking oneself to the highway, on the highway. Tree hugging, meditation, ice cream, naturism again, water, forest bathing. I don't believe it is ice cream, says Anya. Distraction, another distraction, getting naked in the woods, says Lynn. Not talking about the weather, that helps. Yes. Inner journeys, being naked, cool and free, cannabis, breath. Okay, mindfulness. Well, laughter yoga. Hooray. Sit under a tree and read a book. Okay. Wonderful. Well, that's great. What a wonderful being a tree, a forest, swimming in the sea. Yes, I was swimming in the sea this morning in Seaford. That was fantastic. It was nice and cold and chilly, which was wonderful and so refreshing. Being skyclad, but not on the bus. Meditation and a good laugh. Wild swimming, relaxation, cold water in the bath, bathing. Taking a bath in the sea with Ipanema. Ipanema, playing on the headphones, or do you mean actually at Ipanema? Keeping the kids home from school because it's too hot. A cool bean sock. That's interesting. Is that a sock full of beans that you put in the fridge and then take it out, I suppose, and it's kind of cold? A trip to Dairy Queen. Well, there's so many answers here. Laughter. Okay, so, right, fantastic. Well, congratulations. Everybody's feeling very creative and laying down with my head in the freezer. Okay, well, those who said naturism got the answer, at least the answer I was thinking of. You can see there are lots of answers. And I wanted to talk about that because it's so damn hot. my mind has naturally gone to that topic, about which I wrote a book. And so I'm a person that the BBC rings up whenever somebody streaks across a football pitch. I get a phone call from the BBC for an opinion. Of course, it's the book that got the most reviews of all the books I've written. But it's a serious book. This may seem like a trivial topic, but it's not. And the reason I said it has the potential to be humorous, well, it just can be tremendously silly. And I've managed to find lots of examples of that. I think I start the book off with the naked rugby match that they play in New Zealand, where people streak, but the streakers are clothed and the players are naked. So there's it's an endless source of amusement for people. And there's something inherently absurd about it. And another thing I start my book off with saying is, what is it about human beings that we can be so endlessly fascinated in the form of our own bodies, the naked form of our own bodies? Such a preoccupation for many people. And is it just because we're preoccupied with something of little importance, or does it speak to something deeper going on? And then the book starts to look at what may well be deeper going on. And the book is split into religion, politics, and art. So the first third of the book, I deal with religion. And the reason that I got to this subject was because my Druid teacher, Ross Nichols, was a naturist. And he admired very much the Jain tradition, which is a spirituality in which some of the followers, some of the monks in the followers, are naked. And they're called Digambara, which has a wonderful meaning. We'll get to that in a second, because the other thing about this topic, as well as it having all these interesting connections, of course, it plays its part in the history of paganism. And here's why. Those of you who are familiar with Wicca will have heard of the term skyclad. This rather nice poetic term, skyclad, which means not having any clothes on, doing ceremonies skyclad. People will talk about it. The title of the book is called A Brief History of Nakedness. And on my website, you'll see a link in the book section. You'll see it there. Somebody's asking. Are there any other bald mammals? Well, Sky Guy, that's an interesting question. It was the topic of a lecture, a conference I attended on nakedness at the Wellcome Foundation. And I mustn't get distracted by reading the comments. They're all, I can see they're really interesting. So what was I talking about? I was talking about, oh God, I've forgotten that. Okay, I'm going to switch to that distraction, which is, oh no, religion. Yes, the Jains. Skyclad. Well, the Jain monks are called skyclad, Digambara, which means literally, the literal translation is clothed with the quarters of the sky. They only have the 4 quarters of the sky as their clothing. And Ross Nichols was a student of Jainism, and he was also a friend of Gerald Gardner, who really developed the modern tradition of Wicca in the 1950s in Britain. And they both used to hang out at literally at a naturist centre in St Albans in Hertfordshire during the war years. And I always find it rather fascinating, this sort of thought of these two founders of the sort of modern Druid and Wicca movements sitting naked on a lawn in Hertfordshire as sort of German bombers were coming over and bombing London during the Blitz. And Ross Nichols was very educated. Gerald Gardner was homeschooled and wasn't very educated and was dyslexic. And it's almost certain that Ross Nichols introduced the two terms skyclad and the Book of Shadows to him. The Book of Shadows because Ross knew of an Indian palmist called Mir Bashir who wrote about the Book of Shadows. And before Gardner knew Nichols, he referred to what is now known as the Book of Shadows as the Ye Olde Grimoire. And then he started talking about the Book of Shadows, and he started using this term, which actually comes from Jainism. So that was my way into this. And in researching for another book, Journeys of the Soul, which is a biography of my teacher, I went to this place in Hertfordshire, Spielplatz, this nudist resort, England's earliest utopian community, some people call it, and visited there and became so intrigued. I had always thought it was rather kind of passé, strange activity that wasn't very, I don't know, it just didn't appeal. But as I was sitting there clothed in this naturist resort on the hottest day of the year, I have to say, interviewing a couple of elderly ladies who were had known my spiritual teacher, I looked across the lawn and I saw a grandfather, a father and mother and children all having a picnic together with no clothes on this lovely, balmy, sunny day. And it just suddenly hit me, the obvious hit me, which is that this is really lovely, and what a nice way to just be free and to practice freedom and to be in touch with nature. And so I asked if I could take my clothes off. They said, yes, we didn't ask you because we didn't want to embarrass you, but go ahead. And I spent a lovely afternoon there swimming in the pool. And then I got on to writing about this other book as I looked at Christianity's approach to nudity, which is strangely, if you look in the right places, is strangely positive. Because, of course, in the Bible, it talks about man being made in the image of God. So they can't be too rude about nude people, because nude people apparently look like, or certainly nude men look like God, apparently, from a Christian perspective. So they can't be kind of rude about that. So you see, there's this whole interesting religious kind of topic here where you can explore this. And I found a wonderful mystic called Lala, who was a 14th century Kashmiri mystic who was female. And she liked to be naked. She was skyclad, and a lot of the time. And what I love about her, she's as well known in places like Kashmir as Rumi and Hafiz. And she's a universalist in as much as she's influenced by Sufism, by Islam, by Shivaism, what else? Sufism, Vedantic non-dualism, and so she's free. She's free philosophically, religiously, as well as physically as well. And let me just read you, her poems are very brief and beautiful. Let me give you a feel. Remember, this is the 14th century, and this is a woman. Dance, Lala, with nothing on but air. See, like skyclad, clothed with the quarters of the sky. Dance, Lala, with nothing on. Sing, Lala, wearing the sky. Look at this glowing day. What clothes could be so beautiful or more sacred than just the air? And on a day like that, that's what it feels like. It feels that's the sort of, all one wants is air. And then listen to this. This sounds so modern. It is translated by Coleman Barks, who's translated a lot of Rumi as well. So there's going to be a kind of maybe a modern feel to it. But nevertheless, despite that, listen to this. Whatever your name, Shiva, Vishnu, the genius who inspired Sherazad, savior of the Jains, the pure Buddha, lotus-born God, I am sick. The world is my disease, and you are the cure. You. Oh, and how that speaks to me in these days when we feel the world sick with climate change, with war, with starvation. The world is my disease and you are the cure. The divine. Here's another piece of Lala. The soul, like the moon, is now and always new again. And I have seen the ocean continuously creating. Since I scoured my mind and my body, I too, Lala, am new, each moment new. My teacher told me one thing: live in the soul. When that was so, I began to go naked and dance. Lala, you've wandered so many places trying to find your husband. Now at last, inside the walls of this body house, in the heart shrine, you discover where he lives. A cure for loneliness. The last poem in the collection. Playfully you hid from me, all day I lurked. Then I discovered I was you, and the celebration of that began. So, the beautiful poetry of Lala. So you see, there's a strong religious component in naturism, in nakedness. There's a strong political story as well. So the second third of the book goes into the politics of this. Some of you will be familiar with the story of Lady Godiva, which is an apocryphal story from British politics. Rather interesting one, because when you start to look at nakedness in politics, you see the power of women. It's women who tend to initiate these kind of protests. In the mythical protest, or so we think that it's mythical, of Lady Godiva, the story is that her husband was the mayor of a town. He put up taxes. She remonstrated with him saying, listen, the people won't be able to pay this. This is unfair. If you don't lower the taxes, I am going to ride naked through the streets of Coventry, I think it was. That's where the story of Peeping Tom came, because he was the one. All the citizens respected her so much for her political stance that they deliberately turned away as she rode on her beautiful horse through the town, except a chap called Peeping Tom. But whether or not it's true, if you look at the story of protest, you find that often it's initiated by women. There was a big movement called Breasts Not Bombs, which was against nuclear proliferation. And then my book is full of stories of political protests. I even managed to find one, very rare, but I managed to find one from somebody from the Middle East protesting against the war in the Middle East, a Syrian artist in New York. So, and then because of the connotation of nakedness with authenticity and honesty, because you've got nothing to hide, it's been used by politicians. So there was a women's party in Sweden who all posed naked with strategic pot plants, of course, and mainly Catholic countries, sort of mayors, with a pot plant saying, look, I've got nothing to hide, as a sort of catchy title or whatever. And then moving from politics into art, the final third of the book, there are lots of different examples, from naked ballet to opera to theatre to film to pop concerts. But the one example I think that the little sort of story that I think is interesting was towards the end of the 20th century. Two films came out, Full Monty and Calendar Girls, and they changed our attitudes to nakedness. What happened, very briefly, is up until the AIDS epidemic, there was this kind of movement from the 60s onwards of people feeling very free, and nakedness was associated with freedom and also with permissiveness and so on. But it became, ever since the musical Hair and so on, through the 60s, 70s, 80s and so on, it was associated with that. And then when the AIDS epidemic began, and rather sadly, but symbolically, that beautiful photograph of John Lennon curled up like a little baby, naked, in the arms of Yoko Ono, who was wearing all black, which was taken the day before, I believe, he was shot and killed. Kind of around that time, the AIDS epidemic hit, and the sense of vulnerability in the human body and the problematic nature of sexuality became really strong for people. And so there was a kind of reduction in the amount of kind of attention given to nakedness. But by the end of the century, you had these two films. And if you can imagine somebody pitching a film and you say, what's the story about? It's a bunch of unemployed guys who strip because they've got nothing else to do, and they haven't got any money and all the rest of it. And they form a male striptease club, performance. You might well say, if you were a film producer, sounds a bit sleazy to me, I'm not really interested in that. But of course, as we know, it was a fantastic film. It was funny, it was politically relevant, it was psychologically relevant. It dealt with issues like body image, depression, and so on, single parenthood, a bunch of stuff. So to the extent that the Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair, sort of did a sort of dance in the unemployment queue, imitating the movie, and so on. And then Calendar Girls came out. And this was about a group of women, a true story, who posed for a naked calendar to raise money for a cancer charity because one of their husbands had died of cancer. So a noble cause. And this changed suddenly from being something rather sleazy or tacky. It became kind of heroic. And as we moved into the 21st century, everybody was producing calendars. The local inland, I've got this whole collection of them for my book. The local inland revenue offices, they'd all take their clothes off and be photographed for their works calendar and so on. So that's a kind of interesting example of a sort of cultural phenomenon. I can see that there's lots of, I became known as the naked nurse when I used to run the well-being area on the first Rainbow Circle camps in the late 80s, says Lynn. How wonderful. There's lots of interesting comments here. In the 16, but I have to get back to these. Do read the comments afterwards. They sound fantastic. I'll pop in. I wrote a piece about Lala with some more quotes from her poetry, which I'll put in my blog. And I'll give you a link to my book if that's of interest to you. Don't buy the ebook because the ebook has no illustrations. And I managed to find extraordinary illustrations. It opens with a fantastic one of a completely naked man with a hat on, walking across a street in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam, protesting against clothes rationing by the Germans. I mean, my God, the courage of that, wow. So a big topic. People used to say to me when I was writing the book, they say, what can you say about nudity? I mean, there isn't much to say except, people have either got clothes on or they got them off. No, all of human life is there. It's a ridiculous story. It's funny. It's absurd. It's tragic. Think of the Abu Ghraib prison, the way American soldiers made Muslim prisoners strip and photographed them naked to humiliate them. So it's tragic. Of course, there's a whole issue of intimidation, of flashing, of abuse, all sorts of stuff. It's all of life can be looked at from this particular perspective or through this particular topic. So let's have a little meditation. There's a wonderful piece of information about the nervous system, which is that it cannot distinguish between physical reality and what is imagined. So that, and the obvious example of that is if I invite you to imagine cutting a lemon now in half and then squeezing that lemon juice into your mouth, it's possible that you will salivate. Hence the power of the mind, hence the power of visualization, hence the power of meditation, hence its value, because we can affect our emotions and our physical health. So let's just go. I'm going to suggest that we go off. So we're in the sacred grove at the moment. We always meet in these Tea with the Druids in this sacred grove, a wonderful clearing in the forest. And even though it's dusk and there's still a little bit of sunlight around, it's still very hot. And just imagine, if you will, that you have the opportunity. You've heard of a beautiful, cool pool. It's a little higher up, just above the tree line in the forest. And so you can just imagine that you're leaving the clearing now. And just walking up a little path that you've found, if you want to. You don't have to do this meditation if you don't want to, but if you want to, you can just follow this path. And it's just really easy, and sense the birds in the trees, little creatures scurrying, until you get a little higher up, and it's still quite warm, but the air is just a little bit fresher. And then you think you can hear a waterfall. And you find yourself coming out from the woods to see a pool before you. The pool is surrounded by rocks. If you've ever been to Merlin's pool on the way to Dinas Emrys in Wales, you might like to imagine that. So beautiful. This fresh, cold water tumbling down the rocks, a little waterfall. And the water seems so inviting. And if you want to, you can take your clothes off, but you don't have to. You can just get in there however you like. And just allow yourself to get into the water if you feel like it. And just feel this cool water on your body. You splash your face with cold water. Maybe you even dive down into the water. And then you do that lovely thing of, making a star shape, of floating on your back. So you feel the cool water underneath you, and you can see just the beginning of the stars coming out as the sun is starting to set. And the stars are shining above you. And you feel the energy of the stars flowing into you. And you feel the energy of the cool water sustaining you and supporting you, refreshing you and cleansing you. And then you imagine that you just swim over to the waterfall and you cup your hands. You take some of the water in your hands and you drink in this cool, refreshing water. You feel that cool water flowing into your body, bringing such a sense of life and vitality. And then you swim back to the edge of the pool and you climb out. And you either just let the warm air dry you as you walk back through the woods, or there's a little towel beside you that you dry yourself with. And you just walk back, feeling the leaf mold beneath you, entering the woods and feeling the way it's just a little bit cooler in the woods. Coming back to the clearing and sitting down, closing your inner eyes, feeling connected to earth and sky and the trees around you. You take in a deep breath, hold for a moment, then breathe out fully and deeply. And as you breathe out, your awareness of being in the sacred grove, in this special place, begins to fade as you become fully present here and now, sitting here. So I hope that feels good for you. And, in my quiz question, I said, which surveys suggest can be helpful in reducing symptoms of anxiety and promoting feelings of nature connection. This question of nature connection is very big at the moment in the mental health field because psychologists and scientists are starting to realize that when people feel connected to nature, they feel better. Hence, I think why some of you mentioned forest bathing, exactly that. Well, surveys that have been done with naturists say that the benefits they receive are an increased sense of being in touch with nature and a reduction in any symptoms of anxiety they might be having. So I was once, I suppose, one of the most sort of prestigious speaking engagements I've ever had was with the Wellcome Foundation, which is the second largest charitable foundation in the world, huge medical foundation in London. And they had a day's conference on skin. And they had professors talking about skin and why we're the only bald. Somebody asked a question about bald animals and how, I think there are some, but very few. How come we haven't got hair and all the theory all over our bodies and why and so on. So there were various professors presenting, and then I presented. And I thought, since I was at the Wellcome Foundation, which, the whole medical establishment is involved, of course, in developing cures for anxiety and depression and so on. I said, why is it that these findings about the effects of naturism aren't being used in the healing professions? Because if you can get a significant alleviation of the symptoms of anxiety and a promotion of the feelings of nature connection with such a simple activity that requires no medication and has no side effects, why aren't we exploring that now? Why aren't GPs, for instance, using it in their social prescribing? Social prescribing is what the NHS do now for things that are not conventional medical treatments to do with drugs. So they will socially prescribe, walking or sessions at the gym or swimming or whatever. So that was my opening shot to the Wellcome Foundation. And then finally, I just wanted to mention Merlin's Pool. If you ever happen to be in Wales and you're going to visit the wonderful Dinas Emrys, have a look at Merlin's Pool. And whilst I'm always really keen on skinny dipping and jumping into lovely pools and all the rest of it, I remember going with a group of fellow Druids on a retreat. There were about, 18 of us or something. And I've forgotten when it was. It was something, it wasn't summer, it was kind of March or April or something. That wasn't particularly warm. And we were walking to Dinas Emrys. And as we got to Merlin's Pool, which is this tremendous pool that, as I described in the meditation, everybody took their clothes off except me and jumped in. And they said, come on, Philip, aren't you jumping in? You've written that book. You're into this kind of thing. And I said, well, nobody's got a towel. This is insane. It's cold. It's freezing. And there isn't a towel. And so I held fast and I sat by the pool, dabbling my toes in it, and didn't get in. And everybody else splashed around and had a marvelous time. I wish I had now. So have a lovely evening. A big thank you to Dave for holding the fort last week and giving a really, really great talk about nature connection and about the introduction of gratitude into the greeting of the four directions. I like that so much. We've inherited from the pagan tradition, or our ancestors or our elders, this idea of asking, please can I have clarity from the east? Please can I have depth of feeling from the west, and so on. And of course, the problem with that is you're setting up a sense of lack. So you need to take it in, you need to take. And Dave made the lovely point that, it's all inside me. So I want to give thanks for it and recognize it and feel it, because there isn't a lack of these qualities at each of the quarters and directions. So that's a beautiful, radical and great concept. And so I'm very grateful, Dave, to you for having talked about that. So have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. So many, many blessings and much love. And I'm going to go back now and read all these comments because I can see they're really interesting. Okay, bye.